How do we teach our children about the wonder of God's plan for love, marriage, and sexuality? In an age when our children are surrounded with immoral sexual images and explicit sexual education programs in their schools, how do we protect their innocence? And how do we pass on the proper message when the time is right that human sexuality is meant to be holy and beautiful? These are the questions that parents primarily in the Western world repeatedly and pressingly asked our late Holy Father John Paul II. He saw that we are in a time of cultural crisis, and in 1995 he responded by commissioning a pontifical council comprised of dozens of clergymen, religious, and lay family experts. They looked to the heart of the Church's teachings and wrote a guide for parents who need help in educating their children on the delicate subject of human sexuality. The title of the document is The Truth and Meaning of Human Sexuality: Guidelines for Education Within the Family. The program you are about to view shares the principal points of that document through the testimony of parents and educators who follow church teachings in their own lives, and through clergymen who help spread the wisdom of a crucial Catholic document. We encourage you to thoroughly read The Truth and Meaning of Human Sexuality: Guidelines for Education Within the Family.
My name is Kuharski, and I am the mother of 13 children. We cheated a little bit, I always say. We had 7 by tummy, as the kids would say, and 6 by airport or adoption. We have kids they were special needs kids. One came from the Philippines, 2 from Vietnam, one who was black Vietnamese and 1 full Vietnamese, 1 from Calcutta, India, 1 who's Mexican American, and 1 black American. And I'm now the grandmother of 15 kids. So some of my kids have grown and entered the United States service. I have one boy in the St. John Vianney Seminary, and I have several who are married, quite a few who are married, and so we have lots of grandbabies, and that's wonderful too. And I work now. I've graduated from the home, and I now work full-time as the director for Pro-Life Across America. We're an educational, non-political organization bringing messages to the public through mass media education, primarily billboards and radio ads. Planned Parenthood speaks to the lowest common denominator. They're really in the business of peddling abortion, but they also, I think, they peddle misery, they peddle disappointment, they peddle disillusionment. They want kids on contraception, and they want them sexually active, and sad to say, they want them having abortions because that's the business that they're in. Unfortunately, even good Catholics, even good Christians, we end up with a society that this Planned Parenthood mentality has permeated all of society, even sometimes in what we would know as Christian circles. Planned Parenthood expects that our kids can't control themselves, whereas we as family, as parents, we want our kids to know, yes, the sexual urge is strong, but God gives us the grace, and that we expect great things from you. We want you to save yourself as the treasure and the gift that you are until marriage. So we're really living counterculture to the Planned Parenthood mentality. You know, I'm a mom, and from my own point of view, I had 13 kids, and each kid looked at their own sexuality or the gift of even marriage and questioned at a completely different time. There wasn't any 2 kids that saw things the same way. And that's why I think parents should be very careful about following anybody's rule that says that textbook your child should know this or you should be telling them this. No. In fact, I think the less said the better, but that may put me way out of line. I honestly do believe, I'll never forget one time when I told my husband we had to sit down and have a frank discussion with our children because they were older, and my son Tim had asked me a question about girls. And so I called my husband at work and said, we have to do this. Well, my husband almost panicked because he doesn't talk about sexual things. So he comes home that night and we sit down. When you have as many kids as I do, you don't sit them down one at a time. We actually sat down 2 boys and 2 girls at the same time, and we were going to try and talk to them about, you know, the goodness of God and how He brings babies into the world and everything. And my husband, of course, couldn't talk. And years later, my kids remember the quote-unquote sex ed talk that we had, which did not go into any detail at all. And my son Tim said one of the wisest things. He said, you know, Mom, Dad didn't have to talk to us about sex education because we saw the way he treated you. He never ever turned on a movie that was bad. He never brought a magazine home that was bad. He never talked in a disrespectful way. He always treated you with such respect. He said that was the best sex education that we could have, was to see the way he loved you. And I really agree. If that's what we want our children to know, that sexuality is a gift, that it belongs in marriage, and it's a treasure, and we treasure each other. What better way than to live that through and let our children, see that. Sometimes when you have a large family, the children will pick up or learn, or they'll imitate because they see the older children as role models. And I always, of course, I'm part Italian, and I always said that that's kind of like the mafia. They protect each other, they looked out for each other. In fact, they kept each other out of trouble oftentimes, and sometimes when a guardian angel would come and tell me something that I didn't know about a certain kid, I felt it was it really was a help to them. And the same thing with sexuality. I remember one time going to one of my last youngest daughters and saying, I think it's about time that I sit down and talk to you now about something you should be prepared for. And she says, oh, Mom, don't worry. She says, Angie and Mary told me that a long time ago. And at first I thought, oh, that's my role. But then I thought, how very sweet. And of course, we still sat down and went through it again, because I'm the mom, and I have to make sure that I want her to hear it from me about the preciousness of how God has created us in this unique way. He could have put babies on a tree and we pluck them off a tree, or he could have had couples walking down the street and just drop them through the clouds. But I try to tell my kids, God wanted from the very beginning a safe, warm haven where the baby, as it's developing from the earliest days, would hear the mother's voice and feel that warmth right inside the mommy. So how unique and how wonderful, what a gift that God has given to both the husband and the wife to bring new life into the world. I think the biggest challenges confronting Christian parents today is the pressures from outside. And we don't want parents to feel that they're in an uphill battle, because we've always had pressures from the outside. And children, in fact, there's poll after poll after poll. I love knowing about this, even from the secular media, who will say that no matter what, the children will look to the parents, and they really want the parents' respect. And when you think about that, that is really a treasure that we should know about. Even when our kids are acting like, well, my kids used to say, Mom, you guys are born in the Stone Age and you don't get it. We have to not pay attention to that. And we have to let them know, we're praying for you. Yes, there's going to be challenges out there, but we expect great things from you, and we know that you can do it. And we're their biggest cheerleaders. We want to tell them all the time, we're your cheerleader. We're going to help you through this. And if you have questions or problems, or if you fail, we want to help you through that too. And as far as the preteens go, I think that's why we better be very careful about who we trust. If we think, oh, the school can do it so much better than me, I'm so glad, I'm relieved they're going to talk to my kid about sex education. Oh, I hope not. No, you get yourself right in there, and you should be the one. And you let your child know that they're not going to present it the same way I am, because I'm tied in with the church, and only the church is going to give you a full vision, because this isn't just about your body. Otherwise, we could be talking about frogs. This is about your spirituality as well. It's your whole being and our emotions. I've worked with women with crisis pregnancies for years and years and years. And there's nothing worse than having a young woman call who for the first time had a sexual experience and said, I'm so disappointed. I thought it was going to be a big deal. I just feel so bad. And it's because it wasn't made to be a big deal. And that's the beauty of what parents want to do, is encourage their children to see that this is such a treasure and such a gift that we must preserve it and save it for its rightful place in marriage. I'm always amazed that parents are willing to place their children in areas that are so, what I would call occasions of sin, and can be out and out dangerous. I remember the first time this erupted, my son was in high school and told me that after a basketball game, they would not be coming back to Minneapolis where we live, but he would be staying in St. Cloud with a group of the other guys. And I assured him right away that he'd be on the bus. And he said he'd be the only person on the bus. And I said, well, then isn't that nice? You'll be keeping the bus driver company. Well, that didn't go over real good. Well, but I said, you're not going to do that. And he said, well, it'll be fine because there's chaperones. We found out later the chaperone stayed at another hotel, so that made it very inconvenient for the kids and the I would hate to be the hotel managers during that. But my son came home, and so did several others whose parents found out that Tim Kuharski was not going to be there at the hotel. And my reason was very simple. We can all say we're innocent and nothing will happen, but sometimes you get away and under the influence, or maybe there isn't even any influence of drink or drug. It's just the idea of getting away from something, and things can get out of hand before we even know that they can. And so I told my son that to me is an occasion of sin. There's safety in knowing that you belong at home at night. No kids, especially co-eds, should be in any kind of a situation where their resistance is worn down, and that includes prom nights. I'm always so disappointed. My kids went to, I hate to say this, but my kids went to Catholic high schools by and large. There were some that couldn't. And I'll never forget the first time we had a group of parents in the home taking pictures with their teenage kids, and we were all going to say goodbye to the kids. They went out for the night, and they were all gowned up, and the guys suited up, and it was just great. And then one of the kids, I was trying to get the kids to smile as I was taking a picture of them, and I said, okay, say curfew, and of course only I would say that. And I had 2 daughters who were lined up with these other 8 kids, and everybody's smiling, the kids chuckling, and then finally one of the dads said, well, there is no curfew tonight, is there? And I said, well, there is at our house. And then my 2 daughters looked at each other, and then they said, well, our bonfire doesn't start till 2:30. I said, well, it's too bad my kids are going to miss it because they'll be back home at my house by 2:30. And so then he said, well, the bonfire was just the beginning of the evening. And he said, but I can assure you it'll be perfectly safe. I'll be sleeping on the lower level with the boys, and my wife will be upstairs with the girls. You know, what a terrible way to end the evening where you're absolutely exhausted. You've been at a dance, you've probably been bowling, you probably, who knows, the kids can do one function after another. But by 2:30, you should be back home. You should be there where you know you can be in your own bed, everything's safe and warm. What happened, in fact, where my daughters, of course, didn't go, they were back home. And sad to say, the picnic they had planned for the next day was canceled because the kids were too exhausted from the night before. And also some other things happened that were very disappointing to my daughters, who said, Mom, you know, we hate to say you're right, but we're glad we didn't go. So these are the kinds of things. Parents are there. We set up perimeters. We set up a fence, and it's not because we want to deprive our kids. It's because we are so nuts about our kids. We love them so much that we want to protect them from things that we might not even know could happen, and they might not know. And things can happen, and that's our job. That's our role. God's going to ask us, did you just let them go free will and let them make their own decisions? If they're old enough to make their own decisions, they should be moving out. That's my personal opinion. My kids have heard me say that before. Sometimes kids pick up words on the bus or on the playground or with classmates, words that are filthy or terrible or we know aren't appropriate. I always think that's such a catchphrase, appropriate. What do you mean? It's an awful word. It's a terrible word. And there's more and more of that. Even grown-ups, people who should know better, adults, even Christians are now, echoing those kinds of words. I don't think it's necessary to sit down and explain to the child what it is necessarily, because sometimes they're too young to digest what we're talking about here, except to say, that is so awful. It's such a filthy word, and let them know. And I think we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions too much if it's coming from school or whatever, unless it's from an adult. Then, of course, we better, put down everything, put down the pots and pans and get to the phone and figure out why this kid is learning this kind of language. But otherwise, I just don't believe that we need to explain everything on why something is not, acceptable language. It's better just to say it's awful, it's filthy, we don't talk like that. So that's my way of handling it. Sad to say, not too long ago when my kids were little, situations did come up where there was either a homosexual relationship or something that we would consider to be a distortion or perversion of married love, or adultery, out and out adultery, which was on the evening news over something that happened with a public official. And so then you end up explaining something that you didn't think so. I'm trying to make dinner here, and here is the evening news on our radio or television, and it's broadcasting something. And so we have to just let our children know, without going into such detail, that it destroys the sacred images that we want them to hold. We want them to hold up the positive, never the negative. And so I always just said, now remember, God, this is not, the reason why this is so sad is because this is not the way God made us. This is not the way God intended love to be shared. And so whenever we're out of God's realm and we're doing something in a way that that's harmful to the other persons, it's selfish, but it's not the way God intended it to be. He didn't make us that way. And I try to stay within that without going into something that would be too hard for them to understand, especially at an adolescent or pre-adolescent age. As far as what's on the television, the movies, my frank feeling, it got worse and worse and worse. In fact, my husband and I we quit the television. I said I gave it up for Lent, and then the kids said, we gave it up for Lent and we never went back to it. It's kind of like the dishwasher that we never use. But I started investing in old movies, and we really had a lot of fun with some of the good movies that are out there from years ago. But it gave my kids something to do. You know, we'd say, okay, if you do your homework, you can have an hour of watching, you know, and then they could select it or something like that. But to me, there's nothing on television that we're exposing our kids to things. In fact, my daughter, if she were here, she would always say that everything was all right with the show we watched until mom walked in the room, and then mom would say, all right, that's off. And then if I saw something that I said was off, that meant you're never going to watch that show again because I saw something that I thought was. We have to remember, images to children are far more important than anything. We can talk. It's the same thing with abortion. I can tell how awful it is, and you're dismembering a baby. You're cutting that baby to smithereens. You're going to pull that baby out of the mother. The baby that was alive is now dead. We can think about that. Yeah, that's just terrible. But if you see one picture, that's the end. Same thing with pornography. Pornography is so awful because it assaults our vision. It assaults our memory. It stays with us, and we try as we best. We cannot get that image out. And the same thing with they're faced with homosexuality or even issues of masturbation, which I know are now on television too. Those are images our children should be prevented from seeing because it will destroy their view of the beauty of sexuality. And we parents have an obligation. God is going to ask us, did you allow that television? It's not up to the kid to use good judgment. No, that's why they have a parent. It's up to us to say, no, this is not healthy for us. We turn it on only at certain times, or just throw the TV out, get rid of the TV, bring in some games, bring in some old movies. It was amazing. I saw a thing the other night on television where I think there was a big flood or tornado or whatever it was, and these people had no electricity for 2 days, and the television people went over and interviewed them for a news thing and said, you know, oh, and the mother's looking grim and the father's looking grim, and I happened to look, and they had a candle in the middle of a Monopoly game, and the kids are all smiles because they are sitting there with their mom and dad playing good old-fashioned Monopoly, and while the parents are saying, oh, this is terrible, and, you know, I can't get on with my work, and freezer's, you know, defrosted and everything, the kids are delighted because they have the parents' undivided attention. That should be a message to all of us. I'm a traditional mom, so perhaps I don't fit in with other people, but I am not for sex education in the school. I really am not for it. I want our kids to know, and then I want them to be surprised. We're not talking about a plumbing class here. We're talking about something that involves them totally, spiritually, emotionally, physically as well, and personally as well. No boy and girl can get involved in any relationship, even just if they've exchanged kisses, and not come away if they break up without some kind of a hurt going on. So imagine how enmeshed and how hurtful that is when they've been sharing the most intimate things about each other, including their sexuality. And so I just do not believe that the school, even a good sound Catholic school, is going to be able to explain it the way they should be our backup. Okay, go ahead, but they should be our backup. This is really our role. You know, that's just my personal opinion. Oh, the modesty and clothing thing, you know, we parents are just bombarded with, but everybody's wearing it. That's the style today, and it is hard. Sometimes it's hard. That's all that's out there, and you feel bad because you're telling them to sew some lace over here or put straps here, which I've demanded my kids. I remember my son Tim got a part-time job and came home with a pair of jeans that was brand new. He's making himself eggs in the morning, and he turns around, and here is a hole in the back of the jeans, and I said, take those off, you're not wearing them. Now he's in college, and I said, but you're not wearing them at my house. Those, you have to go back to the store. He said, they're brand new. I said, they might be, but someone forgot and put a hole right through the back end, and you're a Kuharski, you're not gonna walk around wearing that. And we have to do, that's our rule. As long as you live in my house, you're on my premises, I own the walls, I own any posters that are on the wall. If there's music, I took my kids' tapes away when I heard by accident, heard the music of something I didn't appreciate that I knew was wrong, and I don't know if my kids had listened to the lyrics or not, so I lined up my kids and said, I want all the tapes. I have to go down to Iowa to give a talk. I'm going to listen to all of them, and you're grounded if I hear anything bad. Well, my son Tony just gave me a whole shoebox. He says, I don't have time for this. And no, I know that sounds kind of strict, but the thing is, I have to answer for what they're hearing, seeing, and looking like, and listening to, and everything else. They won't have to. They can say, well, my mom let me. And then I go up to God, and he's going to say, Marianne, I see your kids were looking like trash, and they had, you know, piercings. No, that's not going to happen. I've got enough sins that I have to answer for. So for me, no, it's not going to happen. You know, and sometimes they get a little older, and they get kind of smarty. They think that they're going to pull a good one on you. You know, I have Oh, I had 7 teenagers at once, so I had all sorts of situations. But one in particular, I remember one daughter she was going off to college now. She's kind of a hot shot, so she knows more than me. And I was out doing grocery shopping one day, and I pull in the backyard, and the kids are out sunning themselves on the deck. Why my Filipino daughter thinks she needs more suntan, but she's out there too. And she jumps up and runs in the house and runs down the basement. Well, she must have had on something I didn't approve of. And you know, guardian angels look out for these kids. So I'm down the basement afterwards doing the laundry. And I go, for some reason, I went into the shower down the basement there, and that's usually the kids' shower. And here is this little postage stamp bikini, top and bottom, that she must have quick thrown in the corner there because she was trying to change so quickly. So, of course, I took it, and I took a scissors, and I cut it up in pieces because it's on my property, and I don't approve of that. So I have I have an obligation, actually, to get rid of this, and I make sure that no one else can use it, too. So, and I never confess stuff like that. I tell people, I'm not going to confess that because in fact, my daughter, Tina, wouldn't dare ask me. It was Tina's suit, but she wouldn't dare ask me. So she sends her sister, Teresa, and Teresa's kind of she was our slow learner, borderline. And so Teresa comes up and she says, Mama, did you see Tina's swimming suit? And I said, nope, I never saw it. And I was very honest because in my view, you could not swim in that postage stamp suit. And if you were on a diving board and swim, jump down, and then come up and have that suit on. So I do not consider that a swimming suit. No, I never saw it. What I saw was this two little postage stamps, and I made sure it was out of my house. So that's the way I operate. My kids will tell you. She sent for some Young Miss magazine, and we got one issue, and I wrote them back and said, this stuff is trash. Cancel my daughter's subscription. I have an obligation. It's coming to my home. Same thing with my son. He had Hot Rod magazine. I thought that was going to be very safe, Luckily, I had nothing to do as I was on the phone one day, and I'm thumbing through this magazine, and they have a swimsuit edition. So I took a razor blade and a scissors that was right near my junk drawer and cut out all the pictures, and I showed it to Tim. I told him I was saving him because they had such great hot rods. He would have been distracted from all of these other things that were going on. And then I canceled the subscription because he didn't need that in my house. Now keep in mind, he was a second-year college student at the time. I don't care. This is my home, my property. I always say it's my castle, and the kids roll their eyes. But in a certain sense it is, because I am the parent and I have to answer for this. And I'll bet you $1 million my son and daughter will be doing the same thing if they really love their children, to prevent them from images that really, in a way, can assault their mind and assault their memory and give them a view of what really counterproductive for their whole way of living, and also can really be disturbing to them. So I don't want any more disruptions or disturbing things in my kids' life. So that's what I do, and that's what I continue to do. That's why I like to put visions of good things. I put the pictures of Blessed Mother, the pictures of the saints. I think every room should have something to remind our children about what our home and what our life is all about. Better that than some half-naked person, which sometimes parents will say, well, I respect their privacy. I don't respect that. I like Ronald Reagan's approach where you trust but verify, and that's what I do. I trust but I verify that everything's going kosher in this house. We take a strong position on chastity and again against artificial contraception because it is abortifacient. It's also damaging to the women. We have 2 beautiful brochures on that, one on chastity and one on contraception, abortion in disguise, and they are now circulated throughout the United States, and I think they've even been translated in other countries too. So I'm not saying ours are the only ones. There's certainly other wonderful ones as well that will help parents. Sometimes I've told parents, if you don't know how to get started with your kids, if you're worried about, well, I don't know how to bring this subject up, grab a pamphlet. Take our pamphlet. Take somebody else's. Take a chapter out of a book that you trust that is going to give the whole Christian Catholic point of view and say, this is what Dad and I want for you. Here's what we believe. This is why we pray for you. This is what we're hoping for you. We're your cheerleaders. We're going to be your best friends. We won't let you down. Other organizations like Planned Parenthood, they want you to fail. And they don't care if they pump you up with foams and jams and jellies and condoms and every other thing. No, pills, whatever. No, we don't want you to, don't ever, get sucked into that. And have that be your opening. Have that little paragraph or that brochure or that book be your, your little introduction to what you want to talk to your child about. Sometimes that's the best way to get going. Planned Parenthood to me is one of the fathers of lies. They peddle lies, they promote untruths, and they promote what they call safe sex, which certainly isn't. Any sex outside of marriage is not safe. You can always end up with not only disease, sexually transmitted disease, the possibility of even being open to AIDS, but also the possibility of a baby as well. And even, as I said, dangerous and death. Death can result. The pills that are on the market, some of the other morning after pill, those things are not just contraceptives that prevent pregnancy, but they really are abortifacient. They cause an abortion of a newly conceived individual human being. I'll never forget one time, we have a hotline that rings because of our billboards, and we get calls from all over the United States when our billboards are up. And I got a call from a young woman who I answered the phone, and she said, I just have one question I want you to answer. And I said, okay. And she said, I want to know, is it true that the pill causes an abortion? I said, well, it can if you've are ovulating at the time. And I started to explain why that it doesn't cause an abortion every day you take a pill. But if perchance that you've been sexually, had sexual intercourse with somebody and you're ovulating, yes, it does. It doesn't prevent those two from uniting. The child that you actually does create a new human being that is eventually destroyed a few days later because of the pill, or the IUD does the same thing. So does the morning after pill. All of a sudden, this woman started sobbing on the phone, and I felt so bad. I said, are you there? She says, but you don't understand. I'm very pro-life. I'm very much against abortion. And I said, well, ma'am, I didn't tell you this to upset you. This is just medical fact. It's not anything. It's scientific evidence. It's medical fact. And I try to tell her the reason why they changed the components of the pill is because the earlier pills that were first out didn't cause abortion, but they caused cancer to women, which should give us all a message about, do we want to be consuming this kind of chemicals, period. She says, but you don't understand. I'm a good Lutheran. I've been pro-life. I'm married. I have 2 children, and my doctor put me on the pill and said, it's about time you start spacing. And he never told me that. Why didn't he tell me? I said, number one, he might not know. Some physicians haven't really taken a look at how this medication, how this chemical works. Or number 2, he might have thought you probably don't know or won't care. And so he's just doing what doctors are asked to do by women all the time. He's just making a prescription for you, thinking this is what you should probably be doing because you've already had 2 children. She was heart sick. This girl couldn't quit crying. I asked her how she heard something like that, and she said, I was actually sitting next to a woman who told me this. We were having a discussion, and somehow or another the subject came up, and she told me that. And she said, I looked at her and said, well, that can't be true. And she said, yes, it is. And she says, I just thought I had to call somebody right away. And she says, I saw your number on a board and just had to call and ask if this is really true. And I said, I can send you some information on it because we have a whole brochure that says contraception, abortion in disguise. And it tells exactly how these devices or chemicals work and how it does destroy a newly created human being. It's important that women know, not just because it does something to their body, but not a lot of women would want to know that they're carrying a time bomb with them that destroys the body of a child too. And also can cause permanent sterility for women later on. We get calls from people who will never have a baby because they were on chemicals for way too long. So there's a lot of damage happening that Planned Parenthood never talks about. I think that's unfortunate, and I think it's a lie.